I've seen bodies torn apart by shotguns and twisted by high-speed collisions on I-5, but nothing terrifies a detective more than a corpse that looks like it's just taking a nap. There was no blood, no bruise, no sign of struggle, just a man sitting in his armchair, a glass of scotch untouched on the side table, dead before he hit the floor. The scariest killer isn't the one you see coming with a knife, it's the one that walks through walls. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. The Seattle rain was relentless, drumming against the windshield of my unmarked Ford Explorer like thousands of tiny fingers tapping for attention. I checked my analog watch, a vintage piece Sarah had saved for 6 months to buy me. My gut twisted. I wasn't just late, I was absent. I pictured the dining room table at home, the roast cold, the expensive cab I'd promised to open, breathing itself into vinegar, and Sarah sitting alone, staring at an empty chair. This was the 3rd anniversary I'd missed in 5 years. The job doesn't just take your sleep, it slowly erodes the parts of you that make you human until the people who love you are just ghosts haunting your periphery. I pulled up to the Zenith Spire, the most expensive residential building in downtown Seattle. Before we crack the seal on this impossible crime scene and expose the killer hiding in plain sight, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss the twist ending that even the FBI couldn't predict. I'm Detective Mark Sullivan. I've spent 20 years in homicide, but as I walked into the lobby, shook off my umbrella, and flashed my badge to the terrified concierge, I felt a cold knot in my stomach. He hasn't moved in 2 days, detective, the concierge stammered. He was a younger guy, pale, avoiding eye contact. Mr. Blackwood, penthouse, keycard access only. The elevator logs show no one went up or down since Sunday. Who found him? I asked, heading for the elevators. The maid. She has the override code. She went in an hour ago. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Space Needle. The uniformed officers had already secured the perimeter, but they looked uneasy. The air inside the apartment was recycled, cool, and carried the faint, sterile scent of ozone and expensive leather, a stark contrast to the damp earth smell of the city below. The victim was Julian Blackwood, a tech mogul worth billions, the CEO of Aether Dynamics. He was sitting in a high-back Eames chair facing the panoramic window. He was wearing a silk robe. His eyes were closed. If not for the lividity, the purple pooling of blood in his lower legs, I would have sworn he was sleeping. Detective Sullivan, Officer Miller nodded to me, looking pale. We haven't touched anything, but here's the thing. The place is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. I pulled on my latex gloves and began the initial walkthrough. Forced entry? None, Miller replied, consulting his notes. The front door is a biometric steel core. Windows are bulletproof glass, sealed shut. The HVA vents are too small for a human. And the security logs? They're clean. Julian entered at 8 p.m. Sunday. The maid entered at 9 a.m. today. Nobody else. I walked around the chair. No exit wound, no strangulation marks. I leaned in close. No scent of bitter almonds or alcohol. The scotch glass was full. So we have a man dead in a locked box, I muttered. Heart attack? Maybe, Miller said, but look at his phone. I looked down. Blackwood's phone was on his lap. It was unlocked, displaying the text message he had started typing but never finished. It read, "It's in the air. It's here. I can't." The medical examiner is on her way, I said, but healthy 40-year-old billionaires don't just drop dead while typing a warning. I walked over to the smart home control panel on the wall. It was a sleek tablet embedded in the plaster. System status, normal. Air quality, optimal. Temperature, 68 degrees. Suddenly, a loud hiss erupted from the kitchen area. It sounded like a high-pressure line rupturing. The temperature in the room plummeted instantly. The air didn't just get cold, it got heavy, pressing against my temples. My hand flew to my holster, drawing my Glock 19. Miller spun around, his flashlight cutting through the dim room. "Clear the room," I shouted, "now." We backed out into the hallway, weapons trained on the open door of the penthouse. The hissing sound stopped as abruptly as it began. Silence returned to the hallway, thick and suffocating. We waited 5 minutes. I signaled Miller to stay by the door, and I moved back in, low and slow. I checked the kitchen. The espresso machine had just purged steam, an automatic timer. But then I saw it. On the stainless steel refrigerator door, in the condensation left by the steam, a single word had been traced by a gloved finger. It wasn't there 5 minutes ago. Breathe. My skin crawled. Someone was in here, or something was. But there was nowhere to hide. I scanned the room again. 3,000 square feet of open concept luxury, empty. Dr. Eris Thorne, the King County medical examiner, pulled down her mask, her expression grim. The morgue was freezing, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and formaldehyde. "Give it to me straight, Eris," I said, leaning against the doorframe. I was texting Sarah. "I'm sorry, work crisis, I love you." No reply. The silence on her end was louder than the autopsy saw. That's the million-dollar question, Mark. Toxicology is clean. No opioids, no cyanide. His heart just stopped. Stopped? A guy that fit? "I know," she said, pointing to the monitor. "But physiologically, it looks like hypoxia, oxygen deprivation. But there are no signs of strangulation, no petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes. His lungs are clear." "So he suffocated in a room full of air?" "Essentially," she nodded. "It's like he was on top of Mount Everest without a tank, but he was in his living room at sea level." I headed back to the precinct. I needed a motive. First up, Elena Blackwood, the estranged wife. She sat in interrogation room 2, perfectly composed, checking her manicure. "I didn't kill him," Elena said, her voice devoid of warmth. "I was in Portland, hundreds of witnesses." "We're checking the alibi," I said, watching her eyes. "But you stood to lose half his fortune in the divorce. Now you get it all." She let out a short, sharp laugh. "You think I wanted his money? I wanted his absence." Julian was paranoid. He spent millions on that apartment security because he thought everyone was trying to steal his precious atmosphere project. If you want to find his killer, talk to his partner, Marcus Vane. They were fighting over the patent rights last week. There was something in her tone, dismissive yet satisfied. She wasn't grieving, she was relieved. I moved to the next room. Marcus Vane was the opposite. Sweaty, nervous, his leg bouncing under the table. "I didn't do it. We were arguing, yes, but that's business," Vane shouted. "Mrs. Blackwood says it was about the atmosphere project. What is that, Marcus?" Vane went pale, his eyes darting to the mirror. He was hiding something. Not murder, maybe, but incompetence. It's a smart environment system. It controls humidity, oxygen levels, pressure. My mind clicked back to the autopsy. Hypoxia. "Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Can that system remove oxygen from a room?" He swallowed hard. "Theoretically, the nitrogen scrubbers, if reversed, they could displace oxygen. But you'd need a root access override. The system is air-gapped. You have to be physically in the maintenance room." I grabbed my coat and called Miller. "Meet me in the basement of the Zenith Spire." The basement was a labyrinth of roaring machinery. Inside the HVAC control unit, we found a thin copper wire spliced into the main circuit board. It ran out of the box and disappeared into a conduit leading to the roof. We took the service elevator up. The rain was lashing down, a full-blown Pacific Northwest storm. On the roof, inside a maintenance shed, we found a laptop connected to the wire. The screen was glowing blue. On it was a live video feed. It wasn't a feed of the penthouse. It was a feed of my living room. My heart hammered against my ribs, a physical pain. There was a mug of tea on the coffee table, Sarah's favorite mug. Steam was still rising from it. She must have just set it down. And in the corner of the screen, a timer was counting down. 00:30, 00:29. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Sullivan. A voice, distorted and metallic, whispered in my ear. "You're looking in the wrong direction, detective. You shouldn't have left your wife alone tonight. She looks so peaceful when she's waiting for you." My blood turned to ice. Sarah wasn't just my wife. She was the tether keeping me from drifting into the abyss of this job. If I lost her... "Miller, get a unit to my house, now!" I screamed, sprinting for the elevator. The sirens of the squad car screamed through the rainy streets, but they weren't loud enough to drown out the pounding of my own heart. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. All I could think about was the look on Sarah's face the last time we fought, her accusation that I cared more about dead strangers than our living marriage. If she dies thinking that, I thought, the bile rising in my throat, I die too. 10, 9, the timer on that laptop screen burned in my memory. I screeched to a halt on my front lawn, tearing up the grass. The house was dark, too dark. "Sarah!" I roared, kicking the front door. It was locked. I fired 2 rounds into the deadbolt and shoulder charged the door open. "Sarah!" I swept the living room, clear. I ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, terror making my movements clumsy. I pushed the bedroom door open, my gun leading the way. She was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding her phone by the light of the screen. She looked up, startled, eyes wide. "Mark, what the hell? I heard gunshots." I collapsed against the doorframe, gasping for air, the adrenaline crash nearly dropping me to my knees. "You're okay?" "I'm fine. The power went out about 10 minutes ago. My phone died." I holstered my weapon and crossed the room, pulling her into a desperate hug. I buried my face in her hair, inhaling the scent of lavender and rain. Real smells, anchoring me back to reality. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." She stiffened, then softened, holding me back. "Mark, you're shaking." My phone buzzed. It was Miller. "Detective, you need to get back here. Marcus Vane is back. He says he realized something about the wire." I pulled away from Sarah. The look in her eyes shifted from fear to resignation. She knew. I had to go back. "Lock the doors," I told her, my voice hoarse. "Don't open them for anyone but me." Back at the tower, Vane was in the back of a cruiser. "Get these off me," Vane spat. "The wire you found? I installed that system. There is no copper wiring in the update I rolled out last year. It's all fiber optic. Whoever spliced that wire knew the original 1990s layout of the building." This was the break. The killer wasn't a modern hacker. They were someone old school, someone who knew the bones of the building better than the tech skin covering it. "Who built this place?" I asked Miller. "Original architect, Arthur Pym, dead," Miller said. "Head of maintenance, Robert Kells, died in prison. But Kells had a son, Simon. An electrical engineer fired from Aether Dynamics by Julian Blackwood personally." I went back to the penthouse. The killer wanted me out of here. Why? Because I was close. I walked to the center of the room. I closed my eyes and listened. The wind against the glass, the click. A tiny, rhythmic click coming from the ceiling. I dragged the heavy Eames chair over, stood on it, and pried the cover off the smoke detector. Inside, there was no sensor. It was a canister. A small, pressurized cylinder canister rigged to a valve. "Miller, hazmat team, I found the weapon." It wasn't the HVAC. The killer had planted these canisters. When triggered, they flooded the room with pure nitrogen. Colorless, odorless, deadly. "Put an APB out on Simon Kells," I ordered. Actually, a voice came from the doorway. Standing there was the concierge, the quiet man who had let me in. He was holding a remote control and a taser. "I'm not in the wind, Detective," Simon Kells said, locking the penthouse door behind him. He pressed a button. Above us, the remaining smoke detectors hissed. "Don't move," Kells said calmly, a strange, serene smile playing on his lips. "Or I flood the room. You have about 3 minutes of air left." The hiss was soft, almost soothing, like a gentle summer breeze escaping a tire. But the physical effect was immediate and terrifying. Pure nitrogen was cascading down from the ceiling, displacing the oxygen. The temperature dropped. My ears popped painfully as the atmospheric pressure spiked. It wasn't like holding your breath. It was like the air itself had turned into a phantom, filling my lungs but giving nothing back. "Drop the remote, Kells!" I shouted, aiming my Glock at his chest. My voice sounded distant, tinny in my own ears. "If you shoot me, my thumb slips off the dead man switch," Kells said, leaning back against the sealed door. "And the valve opens 100%. You'll be asleep in 20 seconds. "Why, Simon?" I asked, trying to steady my hand. "Julian is dead. You won." "You think this is about winning?" Kells laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Julian stole my father's life. My father designed the original airflow systems, analog, safe, breathing with the building. Julian ripped them out. He replaced art with smart garbage. He wanted to sell the air we breathe. I proved his smart home was nothing but a gilded cage." I glanced at Miller. He was blinking rapidly, swaying slightly, a dopey grin forming on his face. Nitrogen narcosis, the euphoria before the end. "Miller, stay with me," I barked, but my own thoughts were getting sludge-heavy. My limbs felt like they were made of lead. Panic was trying to claw its way up, but the lack of oxygen made even fear feel distant. "You're not gonna get away with this," I slurred. "I'm not trying to get away," Kells said, his eyes gleaming with a fanatic's light. "I am the lesson. This is my masterpiece." I needed to act, fast. My vision was tunneling. I looked at Kells, then past him to the panoramic window behind him. Bulletproof glass, reinforced polycarbonate, impossible to break, unless the physics changed. Think, Mark. Focus. The pressure inside the room was now significantly higher than the storm outside. Polycarbonate has high tensile strength, but low shear resistance at the anchor points. "You missed one thing, Simon," I lied, stepping closer to change the angle, fighting the urge to just lie down and sleep. "Oh, and what's that?" Kells asked, amused. "Julian wasn't alone that night. We found the optical backup in the wall safe." Kells hesitated. For a split second, the arrogance faltered. His eyes flicked toward the wall safe, hidden behind a painting. "Miller, breathe!" I yelled, expelling the last of my air. I shifted my aim and fired 3 rounds, not at Kells, but into the bottom corner of the window frame where the glass met the steel bolts. Bang, bang, bang. The third bullet shattered the pressurized seal clamp. With a deafening crack, the structural integrity failed. The pressure differential took over. The entire pane of glass didn't just break, it blew outward into the Seattle night. Kells was knocked off balance, screaming as the wind whipped him toward the void. Miller, gasping for fresh oxygen, lunged forward and tackled Kells just before he went over the edge. The remote skittered across the floor and slid out the broken window. I rushed over, handcuffs out, my lungs burning as they greedily sucked in the cold air. "Simon Kells, you are under arrest." We dragged him into the hallway, but as they marched Kells to the elevator, he looked back at me. He wasn't angry anymore. He was smiling, a terrifying, genuine smile. "You think you saved them?" he whispered. "The canisters. I didn't just put them in the penthouse. I installed them in the main intake for the precinct. The timer is set for now." My blood ran cold. The precinct. Jenkins at the front desk. The captain. Dozens of civilians. "Call the captain," I screamed at Miller, grabbing him by the vest. "Evacuate the station, now!" Miller fumbled for his radio, his fingers trembling. "Dispatch, evacuate, code red." Static. Nothing but white noise hissing back at us. "Dispatch, do you copy? This is Officer Miller, code red." Silence. The radio static hissed like a snake in the dead air. That silence was heavier than the nitrogen cloud. It was the sound of a tomb. I grabbed Miller. "Get him in the car. We drive, fast." We threw Simon Kells into the back of the Explorer. I hit the lights and sirens, tearing through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle. I drove with reckless desperation, mounting curbs, running red lights. "You're too late," Kells taunted from the back seat. "Nitrogen is efficient. By the time you get there, they'll all be sleeping on their desks. No pain, just silence." "Shut up," I roared. My mind flashed to the faces of my colleagues. Jenkins showing me pictures of his new baby. The captain complaining about the coffee. If they were dead because I was playing games at the Zenith? We skidded to a halt in front of the precinct 10 minutes later. The lights were on, but there was no movement in the lobby. No officer at the door? I jumped out, not waiting for Miller. I pulled my shirt up over my nose and mouth, praying it would be enough. I ran to the double doors and pushed through, expecting to see bodies. The lobby was quiet. Officer Jenkins was at the front desk, his head down on his arms. "Jenkins!" I shouted, my voice muffled and cracking with panic. I vaulted the counter and shook him violently. He snorted, jerked awake, and lifted his head, blinking groggily. A half-eaten donut was stuck to his cheek. "Sullivan? What's going on?" I froze. I looked around. A civilian in the waiting chairs turned a page of her magazine. The door to the captain's office opened, and the captain walked out, holding a steaming mug of coffee, looking annoyed. "Sullivan?" the captain barked. "Why are you vaulting my desk? And why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" I ripped the shirt from my face, gasping, my knees shaking so hard I had to lean against the counter. They were alive. They were breathing. I looked back at the glass doors. Outside, in the back of the squad car, Simon Kells was watching. His smile had vanished. He looked confused, broken. I marched back outside to the car and yanked the door open. "Nothing happened," I said to Kells, my voice low and lethal. "Everyone is fine." Kells looked genuinely shocked. "Impossible. I rigged the intake valves perfectly. I calculated the flow rate." "Did you?" I asked. Then the realization hit me, and I almost laughed. "You said you are an analog guy, right, Simon? Hiding in the basement for 2 days planning your revenge?" "The best," he spat, though his voice wavered. "Well, while you were down there plotting, the city came by. Mandatory infrastructure upgrade. They replaced the old intake system at the precinct yesterday morning. Your analog masterpiece is sitting in a dumpster somewhere." Kels's face crumbled. The arrogance, the intellect, the grand design, it all shattered. He wasn't a mastermind anymore. He was just a bitter man who failed because the world had moved on without him. 3 months later, the invisible killer was sentenced to life without parole. I stood on the balcony of the restored penthouse. The smart home system had been ripped out and replaced with manual locks and standard air vents. I checked my watch, the analog one Sarah gave me. 6 p.m. I was going to be home on time tonight. I took a deep breath of the Seattle air. It smelled of rain, exhaust, and wet pavement. It wasn't premium, but it was real. I thought about Kel's father and the irony of it all. We build these smart cages to keep the world out, thinking we're safer if we can control every variable. But life isn't meant to be controlled. It's meant to be lived, messy and unpredictable. I turned and walked back inside, locking the heavy deadbolt with a solid, satisfying click. Some mysteries aren't about what you see, they're about what you don't. And sometimes, the scariest thing in the room isn't a ghost, it's the air you breathe. This case is closed, but the world is full of invisible threats waiting to strike. If you enjoyed this ride, smash that like button, leave a comment with your theory on who the next suspect should be, and subscribe. To survive in this world, trust your gut, not your smart home.